Good evening and welcome to the November 9th, 2021 edition of the Downers Grove Village Council. Due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, we are asking everyone to mask. I want to thank everybody for their compliance. There are copies of our agenda on either side near the doors, and you can also find it at www.downers.us. But before we go any further, would you please all rise and join us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. So as you can see, I am not Mayor Barnett. I am still Mayor Pro Tem Greg Jose. I am chairing the meeting tonight, but as you'll see momentarily, we will have a full complement. Rosa, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Here. Commissioner Colavani.
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin.
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here. Thank you, Rosa. May I have a motion with regard to electronic participation?
Mayor Pro Tem, I make a motion to allow electronic participation for the November 9th, 2021 Village Council meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you all.
That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, which is a proclamation. In the mayor's electronic participation, so as not to have to read it over the phone, he has asked me to read this the proclamation. With regard to Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. Whereas the first recognition and awareness event for Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week was held at Villanova University in 1975, and this past year, more than 750 community groups, faith-based groups, colleges, and high schools across the country came together during the week to raise awareness about the pressing issue of hunger and homelessness. And whereas, for nearly 30 years, the National Coalition for the Homeless and National Student Campaign Against Hunger and Homelessness have sponsored National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. And whereas, the purpose of the proclamation is to bring awareness to the public about the hungry and homeless in our community, and to encourage support for hunger and homeless assistance service providers. And whereas, there are many local organizations committed to sheltering and providing supportive services, as well as meals and food supplies to people experiencing hunger and homelessness, including DuPage Pads, Alex's Mission, Downers Grove Area Fish, West Suburban Community Pantry, People's Resource Center, Hope's Front Door, Catholic Charities, and many other faith and community-based service providers. Now, therefore, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, does hereby proclaim the week of November the 13th through the 21st as Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and urges all our citizens to look for opportunities to help, volunteer, and support organizations working to serve our community, and as Thanksgiving approaches, take time to consider opportunities to donate time, attention, and resources to others. Dated this 9th day of November, 2021, in Downers Grove, Illinois. That brings us to item 4 on the agenda, minutes of prior council meetings. May I have a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move that the council adopt the Village Council meeting minutes from November 2nd as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item 5 on our agenda is public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to come to us and discuss items that are not on tonight's agenda. We will have an opportunity to discuss items that are on our agenda. But if you have any thoughts, comments, questions you'd like to bring forward on items not on our agenda, we'd love to hear from you. Good evening, Dr. Gooden.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Jose and council members, staff. It's nice to be here again. And I wanted to talk to you this evening about historic preservation in Downers Grove. On a personal note, Nancy and I have bought a condominium in a co-housing community in Boulder, Colorado. And we're very enthusiastic about that mode of living. It's hard to give up our single-family home in Downers Grove, but time marches on, and it's really a very interesting group of people that we'll be with there. And as a co-housing community, we don't employ a management agency to take care of the housing and other activities. There's teams of the residents who take care of these things, and so it's very important that people who buy into the property actually become resident there so that they can work on the teams. And so Nancy and I will be leaving Downers Grove, reluctantly perhaps, but it's a very nice setting. And before I leave, we've decided that we want to landmark our home. And therefore, I've been looking into the situation with respect to getting historic properties recognized by the village's local landmark. As you know, in 2015, after several years of relatively unsuccessful participation in the local landmarking program, the council changed the ordinance and the recommendation of a task force that had prepared a very good comprehensive review of the situation and very thoughtful recommendations to the council. I don't want to go into details there, but one of the key findings for the report was that it was important to complete the survey of the village so that we would know what the historic resources were and what would be available, what residents might be encouraged to make historic landmark applications. Well, later in the meeting, I'll talk to the budget on the issue of whether we have any money for that or any plans for completing those surveys of the village. But at this point, I want to show you some information about the residences in Downers Grove and how they've changed over years. May I have the first slide? Yeah, here is a picture based on information from the Downers Grove Township Assessor's Office. For every resident in the township, the Assessor's Office assigns a build date. The build date, in general, I believe, is related to when it comes on the when the house comes on the tax roll. It isn't necessarily when the building permit was issued or when the final inspection was made or people move in. It's related to the financial matters, but it's still a pretty good representation of when the house was built and began to be a residence in Downers Grove. As you see, starting in the 1830s, we really didn't have much going on. But even through the rest of the 19th century, it wasn't really a very active housing scene. It was essentially a little rural village. But after the war, particularly after the Second World War in the 50s, when these veterans were coming back and starting families, Downers Grove really took off. And there was, in fact, over 60% increase in the number of residences in Downers Grove comparing or in the population actually, comparing the 1950 and the 1960 census. It was a 68% increase in population, and the residences at that time, as you see, increased very substantially. And after that big burst of growth, then there had been sort of a steady decline with periods of exceptional growth and periods of steady decline. And so we reached the current 2020. I didn't get data for 2021, but this is the data as of November 2020 in the Township Assessor's Office. And could we go to the next slide? In this slide, I've done it as a numerical representation. The year, I've just done it for each decade. In the year 1900, there were 275 residences that the township assessor has specified were built in Downers Grove at that time. Or they'd been built before that, but they were all counted as Downers Grove residences, 275 in the year 1900. Then for each of decades after that, I've given the number of residents that the township assessor says have built dates, either at that year or before that year. Now, some residences have been torn down that did exist at that time, but the township assessor then assigns a new, later built date to them, so they're not included in this total. This is just the residents that are currently existing in Downers Grove that were built at that year or before. And so the third column shows what percentage of the current residences were built by a particular year. So of the current residences that we have still standing in 19, all of 2.47% of our current residences were built in the year 1900 or earlier. And so up till maybe relatively recently, there wasn't a whole lot of residences that were 50 years old or older. But now we're getting into an era where, starting in 1950, 22% of our current residences were built in 1950 or earlier. So all of them are now 71 years old, and they would be eligible for local landmark status. We've now set a lower limit of 50-year age in order to achieve local landmark status. And similarly, now at 2021, 50 years before that is 1971. So all of the residences that are currently standing and had been built by 1971 are eligible, because they're 50 years older, to apply for local landmark status. And that's now something like 63% predominance of the local residents that are now able, if they want to take advantage of local landmark status. By the year, 10 years from now, in 2031, almost 3/4 of the current residences in Downers Grove, if they haven't been knocked down and replaced, would be eligible for local landmark status. Well, that's a lot of work for the staff if it really turns out that achieving local landmark status is popular. Now, we want it because we think our house is very nice to live in, and we'd like people to continue living in it rather than tearing it down and disrupting the neighborhood. I suspect there will be other people who feel that way, and because Downers Grove is really a very important community. People have a sense of pride, and they really want to protect their community. Well, what would that mean? The next slide shows a picture of what we now know about the potential value for historic properties in Downers Grove. The village staff has posted on the website this map. It shows the historic resources that have been already identified in Downers Grove. The blue areas, there are 4 actually, one up in Shady Lane to the north, and then the central part of Downers Grove, we have that larger blue area, and then along Maple Avenue and also Denburn Woods. Those are the areas that have been surveyed, and so we do know what potential historic resources are there. But I also show the village boundaries, so you can see that that's really a very small, maybe, what, 5% of the village area has been surveyed for potential historic value. But we know that now 63% of the local residences are old enough to be of historic importance, but we have to find out if they are. In 10 years, it'll be almost 3/4 of the residences that will perhaps be historically important, but it's a lot of work to find out if that is actually the case. Because, okay, that's why I believe item F of the findings before you adopted the 2015 ordinance was to complete the survey of historically important areas in Downers Grove. And it's now, how many years after that? 6 years? And this is how far we've gotten. So later I'll ask about the budgeting for historic surveys, but I just wanted to call to your attention that we have a long way to go, and I think it's time to begin on completing that survey of the historic resources of Downers Grove. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Any other public comment?
Yeah, first thing I want to do is apologize to one of your employees, management analysis, Joshua. Yeah. Sorry about that, Josh. Didn't get back to an email. I put some posters up. I want to applaud the First Congregational Church. I want to applaud a lot of the businessmen in the community that allowed me to place posters in their windows for All Saints Night. It was open for everybody. It was a very intimate and wonderful service. I said goodbye to 4 of my friends that I lost the last couple of months. But like I did, it's on my own hand. I didn't apply for a permit. But on that note, I apologize. One thing I've noticed that coming into the city council meetings, everybody wants to blame the city council. Trust me, I apologize because I didn't do my research. And then again, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. But, little minor infractions add up to big infractions. So we'll just leave that at that. There's one thing, since the mayor did a thing tonight about, addressing issues about homelessness, hunger, and all this. A couple weeks ago, some weeks past, I addressed the city council. I would like an answer and a response, especially when it comes to DuPage County pads. Who in your city council, or if anybody is interested at all, to have an auditing or a liaison with DuPage County pads, because you know what? There's some issues going on. I spent some time visiting friends in the parking garage that when I was homeless, I met them over 2 years ago. I kept in touch with them. There's issues with mental illnesses. There's issues with drugs. And there's issues with just people falling between the cracks. It's a slippery, and it's really easy to fall between the cracks. I'm in the process of trying to find new residency because I don't want to retire. And when I went to 50-hour driver community, they rather me do the social service thing and just sit there and collect dust. You can't have the strength of community if the organization involved in your area doesn't treat everybody fairly. I'm not going to get into the details. I'm just asking you guys that you're in charge, and I would like some kind of answer or some response. Y'all got my email address from the last time I was here. Is what are you guys doing to stop the infractors of DuPage County pads and future organizations to basically have a situation where it's nurturing your community, not just bringing a situation where it's like, well, we'll deal with this person, but we'll stick that person in the parking garage. Or we'll deal with this person, but we'll stick that person there. I fight really hard, and it's a real struggle. Stressful. My ulcer just kicked in. I just had a bleed out. But you don't give up. But if you're having organizations like the DuPage County pads are supposed to be responsible, then you being the leaders, you got to make, if they're going to use you guys as a base, then you got to do some checks and balances. And if anybody, I don't want to throw out, throw money to the fan, but if any of you guys want to contact me, I'll be glad to have a private conversation. You guys got to do something. You got a hotel coming up that they're buying. You got people living in your parking garage. Most of them are cleared out. They don't want to deal with them people because some of them have mental illness, drug problems, alcohol problems, and some just gave up. And trust me, I know what the word give up did. I did it for myself for a few years. The fight is a fight. But as you being a responsible and wonderful community, and you have great volunteers, you have people that get involved, but at the same time, there's got to be checks and balance. You got to put something in place to protect your community from organizations that are using you guys as an anchor for stuff that they make a mistake, don't make a mistake, or don't determine that they can do something about it. If it's numbers, they got them. If it's solutions, they don't have them. I applaud your city council. I applaud some of your police officers. they put up with a lot of crap from homeless people, or, I'm sorry, my apology, residentially challenged. But at the same time, the people that are taking responsibility for these people, the Page County PADS, or any other organization, or they got to do something about it. You got a community kitchen. It's great. Pastor Scott and the group of churches, they got really organized. I applaud them. I used it tonight. I've been working since 4:30 this morning because it's the first day I felt good since I got out of the hospital. And I finally got done with my last meeting with the banker at 5 o'clock. And it's like, seriously, it took me all day long to do emails, do this, chase that. But please, I would like to answer. This is too close to my heart. One of the times, and I really mean this, one of the times that I left the DuPage County PADS office in Wheaton, 2 years ago, is the reason I started my non-for-profit. Somebody stuffed drugs in front of Detroit. Since then, the people who committed suicide, homelessness has increased, the people that lose their jobs increase. I applaud to you. Please, find some way to work with these people. It could be a great organization, but they need outside check and balance. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. I want to kind of expound on a couple of things there. First off, thank you for reaching out to us, and thank you for the information. There are a lot of folks on our staff, and I know the mayor is in contact with PADS and other organizations. Staff is in contact with PADS and other organizations routinely. You're right that we have a great community, and I can't even begin to imagine what it is like to experience homelessness. But this council is not empowered really to regulate charities. The state of Illinois does that. The Attorney General's office is the primary arm that regulates charities in the state of Illinois. PADS has a board of directors that they answer to, and if they're not running things properly, it's the board or the Attorney General's office that really ought to be the primary point of contact for dealing with any issues within that organization if they're in violation of the law. Now, if we see someone in violation of the law here in Downers, or someone in violation of a local ordinance, obviously our police take action on that. But if you're concerned about the regulation of charities, this really isn't the governmental entity that you should contact primarily.
Just don't make it a dump site for them.
Thank you.
Please, character community. Because if you got people coming from the city, it's great. It's great. You're helping people. Fantastic. But don't make it a dump site. And there is got to be matter if I'm not asking for regulation. I'm asking for some kind of liaison, some kind of friendly. See what they're doing. Because basically you have a situation in that parking garage this winter that never should have happened.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Item 6 on the agenda is the mayor's report. Mayor Barnett, is there anything you'd like to add at this moment?
No, but thank you for checking.
Thank you. Item 7 is a public hearing on the 2022 village budget. This public hearing will please come to order. This public hearing has been called by the Village Council to consider the proposed village budget. Notice of this hearing was published in Enterprise Newspapers, Inc., also known as the Bugle, on October the 27th, 2021, and a certificate of publication is made a part of these proceedings. I would like to summarize the procedures that we will follow for tonight's public hearing. First, Dave Fieldman, village manager, will provide an overview of the proposed budget. Second, there will be an opportunity for members of the village council to ask questions or make comments. Next, there will be an opportunity for members of the public to make statements or comments or to submit written statements or comments for the record. Then I will again ask if any member of the council would like to make a statement or ask a question. And thereafter, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. At this hearing, witnesses will not be sworn, and a verbatim written transcript of the statements or testimony given at the hearing will not be prepared. However, a recording of the procedures will be made on village equipment and retained until minutes of the hearing have been prepared and approved by the village council. With that, I will turn it to Village Manager Dave Fieldman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a quick presentation about the proposed FY22 budget. The municipal budget is the village's annual implementation plan of its mission and strategic goals. The budget is intended to align day-to-day operations and resources with community priorities outlined in such documents like the long-range plan and the comprehensive plan. There are several opportunities for the public to engage with staff and the village council on the adoption of the budget. You see the schedule here on the screen. We are on meeting number 3, November 9th, public hearing and discussion. We did have a pretty detailed presentation of the budget last week, so I'd like to just hit the highlights of the budget this week. We are proud to present a budget that is once again balanced. Our operating fund is balanced with revenues and expenses equal at $54.3 million. This budget does include funding for the high priority action item, our facilities replacement and sustainability plan. If you're interested in that plan, at the end of tonight's meeting, when we adjourn to the committee room, we'll have a pretty detailed discussion of the facilities plan. On the property tax side, the property tax levy that is proposed with this budget does not have an increase in the levy for operations. However, there is a significant increase, $1.1 million, in the levy for public safety pensions. These are required contributions under Illinois state law. The FY22 budget continues to invest in our infrastructure systems, calling for over $21.5 million investment in our streets, sidewalks, water, stormwater systems. And of that, nearly $3 million of federal and state funding is coming to Downers Grove and will be invested into our street system. The FY22 budget does call for the increase of staffing of 1 full-time position. This is to help us respond to an increased workload in our police department brought on by a recent change in state law. You'll also notice in the budget that it does include an increase in vehicle purchases that were deferred over the last 2 years. The deferral was part of our response to uncertain revenues brought on by the pandemic. We are in a position now to proceed with those necessary vehicle replacements and still have a strong fund balance in that fund. And finally, as we talked about last week, we heard presentations from Economic Development Corporation and Downtown Management Corporation. This budget provides $830,000 in funding for our valued partner organizations. That concludes our presentation tonight, Commissioner. We're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fieldman. Any questions or comments from the council? Mayor Barnett, anything out there?
No, sir.
Okay, that was quick. Comments from the public? Any comments or questions on the proposed village budget?
I forgot to tell you, I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Meadow. I don't know if you still follow that protocol, but I thought it was very good for people to identify themselves and give their addresses when they came to the podium.
Names are needed, the address isn't anymore, but
Okay.
thank you.
Well, at any rate, I'm here this evening to comment on the budget. I'm very pleased with many of the features that you've built in, the trees, all of the other green initiatives that I see growing in the village. We miss Nan Newland and the things that she started, but I'm glad that you're continuing them. The other thing that I wanted to address, though, is the point that I brought up earlier, that the historic preservation activities in the village have picked up very substantially after the 2015 amendment of the ordinance, making it entirely voluntary, that the village can't force anyone to, the village can't make an application for anyone, no third party can make an application, it has to be the individual property owner or the property owner's representative who petitions the village. That's good. But as I pointed out, the staff really has its hands tied because at present it relies on that map I showed you earlier. Any property outside of the surveyed areas, the staff feels is not eligible for landmark status because it hasn't been studied. And I think this will be a growing problem over the years. So my question is, where in the budget is there any provision for continuing the survey of historic potential property in Downers Grove, the properties that are potential historic landmarks? And if it isn't in this 2022 budget, what is the plan for the future to implement that completion of the survey of historically significant properties in Downers Grove?
Well, Dr. Goodman, in my review of the budget, I don't recall seeing the historic preservation surveys continuing as a budget item. That said, it is possible that we could include that in future budgets. It's possible, I suppose, that we could find a way to include it in this budget. Staff would probably kick me under the table right now if they could reach me. But it is possible that we continue that work at any point, really. Commissioner Cullivan?
Yeah, I happen to know a little bit about this, so I actually have a spreadsheet of some 1,100 homes in a Google sheet that I've tracked over the years through knocking on those doors and visiting those houses. Most of them were within the areas that were already surveyed. Some, as we were doing our walks with both Friends of the Edwards House and then subsequently the Historical Society, were able to map out other areas adjacent to that. And sorry, I've lost track, and we're up to 28, something like that, landmarks. So I think my personal feeling is we have more than enough to work on, with people to follow up on. COVID prevented people from actually knocking on doors and inviting them to events. But I think we've got enough where we could go back to those people and tell them that we're interested in their house. The Historical Society, we sent out a mailing last year letting people know that we identified their house as being a potential historic, not only for landmarking but also for the Historical Society's Historic Home Program. And that's an honorary program where we track the history of the home back to the original owner, so we're protecting the history, where landmarking is protecting the home. So I think we've got still plenty on our plate to go back to those people, and I think we should keep our eye on the future. Would we need more of the mapping? Because what happens when we're actually visiting with those people? We had a Historical Society meeting this afternoon to discuss this very thing. Then we do all the research for their house. It was useful having that information available on the surveys, and originally the 2013 Hargis survey is still out there. So I think, just in summation, Dr. Goodman, I think we have enough to work on to help people voluntarily do that. And then I think if we run out of runway on that, certainly we wouldn't be shy to say, okay, village, perhaps we should seek a grant or use our own funding to expand it from there.
May I ask what the relationship of your survey and studies are to the village authorities? Do they accept your
For me, it was
surveys as authoritative?
always as we're researching the architecture of the home, and then we use the county records, and we have the tax deeds and all of that. So everything that's related to it. Now, we can't say that in advance that the home is considered significant or contributing or non-contributing. And then as you're walking the neighborhoods and knocking on doors, you come across certain homes and you just kind of have an opinion and say, I don't think that's landmark worthy. And it's obviously a judgment call. But then if you have a house right next to it that, wow, this amazing house, it looks like it's 100 years old, I'm glad it's still here, then we drill down on that. But we do the individual research to...
Yes, my question was a little different, I think. I didn't state it clearly enough. What happens when your research is submitted as the basis for a landmark recommendation by the village staff?
Dr. Goodman, this really isn't intended to be a Q&A with Commissioner Cullivan.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes, excuse me.
If you have anything else that you'd like to cover?
No, the point I wanted to make was that my interactions with the village staff indicate that unless a property is on the landmark surveys that they recognize, it is not possible for them to recommend that for approval by the Historic Preservation Board or the Village Council. That is my personal experience. Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think exactly how the staff forms their recommendation and how the Historic Preservation Committee then makes its recommendation before an application comes to us is a process that is probably better directed to some offline questions to staff.
Right.
I know I couldn't answer them off the cuff.
I just wanted to point out the strong connection between the survey availability and the ability of landmarking for residents in the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. And it's sad to hear that you'll be leaving us at some point. Your advocacy for historic preservation, parks, open spaces, and many other things has been steadfast and tremendous throughout the years. I've been honored to know you, and I think the same can be said by just about everybody else in this room. The community is better for your service, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the budget from the public?
I thought everybody was here to talk about the budget. I was here last year. I expressed some concerns about the pensions, which has made its way out of the budget again this year, obviously. The reporting was obviously a lot, or I shouldn't say obviously, the reporting was a lot better. It was very clear as to what you guys were looking at. So the questions that I have, District 58 has said that the downtown TIF has expiring and they're going to get about $60 million in new property to the district. Is that coming into the village as well, the similar proportion? And then are you guys, if it is that money going to be allocated to some of these things? That's the first question. The second one is, it seems like there's a significant amount of new construction. So we're talking about historic preservation. The statistic I have here, unfortunately, is between 2006 and 20, it says $1 billion in new property was built within the 58 boundaries, and it's 83% of its new property was residential, which means a lot more tax revenues. So it's not like a one-to-one increase when you do that, because obviously if you're tearing down, there's some value there, but it's probably increasing the dollars. So I'm just trying to grasp where all that potential new money is coming from, or I should say where it's going. So those are my real two questions, and then as it relates to, I think what everybody's here for is video gaming and then marijuana revenue. Is that then also going to be going to these shortfalls that we're going to be planning for? That's a lot of questions, sorry.
No problem. Ed, I'm sorry, we didn't get your name.
Mike Smetana.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to do a bad job answering these, and then I'll throw it over to staff. First off, the downtown TIF expiring. What ends up happening is that the property is then assessed at the new valuation, and you're going to end up seeing the property tax dollar divided up like what you see up here on the screen. So District 58 ends up getting 35.4%. The village ends up getting 10.34%. That percentage has changed a bit over the years. It's been a little closer to 9. It's been a little closer to 10 some years. But essentially, the village will get 10.34% of the property tax dollars. It used to be that all of the increment from the increase in value was caught in the TIF. Now it's going to get divided out in this manner. Did I botch that completely?
So just as a reminder, this is a breakdown of who's on the property tax bill, and Commissioner Jose is absolutely right. The school districts account for most of it. But there's a fundamental difference between school district taxation laws and practices and that of municipalities. The school districts do get to cap, they are subject to tax caps. The village of Downers Grove is not. I am not well versed in the tax caps and what they can and cannot capture, but I know this, that when TIF districts expire, the school districts get to capture the tax value and the taxes generated from the properties that were previously in the district, and they get a large increase in their revenues. The village does not. The village levies a total dollar amount. This year, the total levy dollar amount will be $16.88 or $16.9 million. That is the amount that the village will collect in taxes regardless of the status of that TIF district, okay? So the village does not receive additional revenues with the retirement of a TIF district. The school districts and other taxing bodies do. They also, school districts get to capture increases in their levy from new construction as part of the tax cap laws. The village does not operate that way. We levy a certain dollar amount regardless of what new construction values are or are not. And then the third question regarding video gaming revenue is this budget does not anticipate or show revenue from video gaming or cannabis.
The only other bolt-on question I'll have, and then I'll let you guys have it as I'll be done, is since it's not in the budget, will you guys allocate those dollars toward, because I think the past you guys had said the pensions were going to be 100% on the property tax payers. So are you guys going to use some of that new revenue to alleviate some of that stress that you're going to put on the taxpayers?
Well, I think where that gets allocated would be a function of what the council directs, but I imagine the initial place would be the general fund, but that could change.
That's correct. We'll first see how the policy decision goes on tonight's agenda, and if there is a revenue discussion, we can discuss it as part of the FY22 budget or future budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At least my disclaimer was accurate. Any other public comment? Hearing none. Any final questions or comments from the council? Mayor Barnett?
No, sir.
Okay. In that case, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the 2022 fiscal year budget public hearing.
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adjourn the fiscal year 2022 budget.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye.
The public hearing is adjourned. Number 8 on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion with regard to the consent agenda?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented. Second.
Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
consent agenda passes unanimously. Item 9 on our agenda is our active agenda. We have one item. Is there a motion with regard to establishing video gaming regulations?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to adopt an ordinance establishing video gaming regulations as presented.
Second.
I'm going to deviate a little bit from our typical procedure and start with the council, go to the public, and then come back. Is there any comment or question from the village council? Commissioner Glover.
First, I'd like to restate that while I am in this industry, I have no plans to change my business model in an effort to implement video gaming. I can, however, relate to the businesses seeking it and provide a perspective that my colleagues may not. So any notion that I have anything to gain professionally, financially, or politically are completely baseless. And while we've received many emails and concerns from concerned residents, I appreciate their concern for their community and respect their opinions, but the script and photos distributed to these individuals include many falsehoods and inaccurate descriptions.
Commissioner, can you hang on a second? Mayor Burnett, are you still out there?
Shall I call him back?
Please. Sorry, Dean.
I didn't notice there was his nameplate up there.
Hello?
Hello, Mayor. We are back in the council chambers. We lost you there for a moment.
Thanks, Doug.
You're very welcome.
All right. Commissioner Glover, the floor is yours.
So the script and photos distributed to these individuals included many falsehoods and inaccurate descriptions of how this would be implemented. There is not one iota of evidence or statements from local officials or police chiefs that suggest any increase in crime or decrease in property values. Data actually shows the opposite. I would also argue that residents who are in favor of gaming, and obviously there are many, are not as emotionally driven to write in or speak at Village Hall because they are already going to establishments to use these machines. The emotional response is all too similar to a recent discussion that I would rather not revisit. The notion that establishments who want gaming can and have decided not to move to neighboring towns is, with all due respect, an insult to me and those businesses after years of sacrifice, investment, and hard work that they have worked to plant roots in this town. Comparing ourselves to other towns, and not like Westmont, as if we are saying another town is trashy or is held to lower moral standards, is ridiculous in my opinion. I spent my whole life in Downers Grove and have no plans to move for many reasons. None of those have to do with the morals of residents or businesses. I would also argue that Westmont, for instance, has done a pretty decent job in the way of economic development, luring Amazon Fresh, Mariano's, numerous luxury developments, and restaurants to the downtown. I sure wish some of those developments would have made their way to 75th and Main. As far as comparing to Galena, as previously mentioned, the notion that the town has been completely ruined from gaming is completely false. In fact, the data, again, shows quite a different story. Per the finance director of the city of Galena, the food and beverage sales, which is the only economic indicator that we can go off of, has increased over 27% since 2013 when they opted in. As it pertains to a moral debate, I just don't understand the logic in this. Everyone who I associate myself with must be, as some would say, trashy. I have not been out socially to a sporting event with any of my friends without somebody talking about what they've bet on, what they've hedged, over, unders, things of that sort that I don't even really understand. Watching their phones with excitement, looking forward to see if they lost money or not. So I'm quite certain that most of us can say the same, yet we would never consider our friends immoral or of a lower class. With that said, the real concern must be signage. So I would like to specifically draw attention to some of the falsehoods that have been distributed amongst the community after last week's presentation. So this is the photo that was distributed amongst all the residents that wrote in. This doesn't paint a clear picture based on the ordinance that's presented of what gaming would look like in Downers Grove. Clearly, in the ordinance, you cannot see the video gaming machines from the window. This picture clearly depicts that. This is an actual placement of video gaming based on what has been presented in the ordinance, minus, of course, the window. So it would be in a private area, not as shown in the picture on the left. This picture, also shown last week, depicts over 50% of the window covered by signage. LED, neon, of that sort. This is an actual picture of the entire location, but still, in downtown DG, you can only cover 25% maximum of the window coverage. So it's still, one window could not look like that one window. Also, the list of prohibited signs in our town include LED and flashing signs shown in those pictures, bare bulb illumination, attention getting devices, signs containing neon, box type signs, etc. All prohibited, like I said, in Downers Grove. As we spoke about, we cannot limit the content of the sign. And as of Thursday last week, I'm pretty sure that we took out some verbiage that included beer signs. So, in my opinion, if establishments in Downers Grove really wanted their places to look tacky, they could potentially load their windows up with signage like this. And in my opinion, this is worse than what you'll see in Westmont or other towns that have gaming. It was suggested that we take a tour of downtown Westmont to see what the signage is like. Well, I did that via Google Maps and drove down there. And while I'll say neat looks pretty neat, they did have a sandwich board sign. But of the others, there's very little signage. And I would make the assumption that these businesses have decided to keep a classy look because the majority of their business still has to come from having a family establishment. And I feel like another round, Ballydoyle, the places in our downtown have done a pretty good job of doing that. There was also an indication that people in Downers Grove would have to lose $10 million in order for us to make $500,000 in revenue. That's also inaccurate. The actual number would be $5,646,000. And while that sounds like a lot of money, these people are gaming anyway. They're choosing to entertain themselves by going there and losing a maximum, or not a maximum, but on average, $50 per occurrence. And they do it to entertain themselves. I believe that this is coming to all towns, not just Westmont, not just Lamont, Lombard, all the surrounding towns, but this map shows the whole county of DuPage. And the green shows the places that have opted in. Since 2017, if Downers Grove opts in, the number will have doubled, almost doubled, within 5 years. I expect that trend to continue. Again, gambling is a moral debate. I just don't think it's a moral issue. People who visit these establishments, on average, spend about $50 per trip. There are many things that we all do for entertainment that cost more than $50. We could go play bingo at the American Legion. We can go play a round of golf, which is on average is $61. We could just go out for a night on the town, which is $90. So many things are about the same amount. We spend the same amount to entertain ourselves. I put together a casual restaurant's typical P&L statement. This is not a specific place, a specific restaurant. This is just based off of typical percentages. When you add in video gaming potential, you without raising any expenses, you automatically increase the ability for a restaurant to compete with other towns income streams. And if those establishments, not saying they will or have to, they could certainly use that money anywhere that they would like. But I know in today's market, being in the industry, that staffing and payroll is the biggest concern for us all. Everywhere you go, you're seeing signs, now hiring, everywhere down Ogden, everywhere down 75th, every single place is hiring. And I know it's across not just the restaurant industry, but all industries, but we cannot compete with the neighboring towns. My employees can walk 4 blocks to the east and get $5 more per hour than I can afford to pay them. This spreadsheet right here shows the equivalent of a number of full-time employees, a GM, all that can get approximately 37% increases if an owner of an establishment wants to allocate those funds towards their payroll. And I think right now they need to. With that said, I feel the knee-jerk reaction of tabling this for a recommendation by the EDC is really not something that I believe will provide us any type of benefit. This is a very subjective, and there are far too many variables to get a clear picture. If a representative from the EDC were here tonight, I would ask if this is something that would be in their wheelhouse. But since they're not, I would like to ask the question to staff, is this something that the EDC can provide us?
We cannot speak for the EDC. If that's a question that council would like to ask, we could ask them.
There is no argument that this will provide the option of additional revenue to an establishment to use to better their business as they see fit. Due to the feedback from the community and property owners, I believe it does warrant the compromise, as presented by my colleagues, in good faith, to zone it out of the downtown area, if nothing else, to see how these concerns actually materialize. That's all, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the council at this time? Commissioner Sadowski-Fuge.
Yep. In general, I am in agreement with Commissioner Glover. I know that there have been some concerns, and I can empathize with those. I'm a parent of a young child.
But I am a little bit concerned with some of the rhetoric that has been thrown around with regard to video gaming. There's almost this implicit implication that those who enjoy this form of entertainment are lower class, as Commissioner Glover referred to. And while people of all socioeconomic statuses play these machines, even if that weren't the case, I'm really uncomfortable with this class-based and almost it's an insulting argument. I am not sitting up here. My job up here is not to rank perfectly legal, what we would call vices, and vote certain ones out of my village because of my personal preferences. I'm here to help residents and businesses in Downers Grove, and based on my discussions and feedback, and I have had back and forth with some folks on email, which I do appreciate, it appears that the compromise to allow video gaming, but to ban it where there seems to be more heavy foot traffic in downtown, seems like a good balance that most folks can get behind. And it's something that we discussed one-on-one in many forums with quite a few of my colleagues. So I am hoping that we can continue to work on that compromise. Like I said, I'd be willing to, ban in downtown. I would be willing to drop the number of potential licenses just to start it off. But I'm really hoping we can continue to engage on this topic and move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions at this time? Commissioner Glover?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have Commissioner Gilmartin. That's what I get for looking too
Happens
far.
all the time. I'm sticking for Danny. So I first want to thank the members of the community, both business and residents, who have both reached out and have been willing to take my call, sharing your thoughts and opinions and feedback around this topic. It's always been important to me to view my decision on the ordinance as an effort to balance between the desire to help our local businesses and to reflect the sentiment of what our residents want. My position all along has been that I'm not sure that we will see the revenue that is projected as presented, nor that this will give a direct ability for restaurants to compete for both staff and customers, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That's about my decision of why I showed support for this. It was more about an opportunity for a small way to help businesses who have been hit hard by the pandemic. As a small business owner and local customer of these businesses, I can empathize with many of the challenges that many of our businesses continue to face. Because I don't personally have a problem with gaming, I started my process making my decision to best understand how we could execute on gaming that would strike the balance I mentioned above. I spent hours reviewing other ordinances, observing what other towns have done with gaming, and found myself more and more familiar with the options that we as a village have, primarily on restrictions, many of which you see in the draft ordinance. However, I have all along said my support was not unconditional. I continued to spend the last week talking to many residents and multiple restaurant owners who are also directly affected by this, all in an effort to better understand the different perspectives on the ordinance at hand. And first, from the residents, and until just a few hours ago, the vast majority, an overwhelming support, was to keep gaming out of downtown. I have yet to meet anyone who supports it downtown, not even the downtown business community. The board of the Downtown Management Corporation, which is a mostly taxpayer-funded body, voted to make the recommendation unanimously to keep gaming out of downtown. Keeping it out of downtown is something that I support, which I believe was in line with the community. But I think in my desire to try to support a compromise on this, I perhaps failed to view the bigger picture of what our residents want and the benefits to the residents versus what some of our restaurants want and the benefits that they seek. While I usually try to go off more standardized information, and really up until a few hours ago, my assessment of the resident feedback I had received throughout the week, both solicited and unsolicited, and particularly of late, is that the sentiment may in fact be against gaming as a whole, but that some who thought there might have been an inevitable yes vote were proclaiming their support downtown in an effort to minimize their perceived impact. And while I had not heard from anyone not directly impacted by the decision in favor of this decision until just a few hours ago, and at all in the past week, tonight the council has received a number of electronic comments which are available for the public on our website in favor, only just a couple of hours ago through our remarks system. With this new feedback, this leaves me in a position that the general sentiment of the community around this decision, something I think is my obligation to consider, is not as clear-cut as I thought only just a few hours ago, which only bolsters the idea, in my mind, of tabling tonight's vote. As someone who has strived to be thorough in my analysis, I support the idea of asking our Economic Development Corporation, a taxpayer-funded organization that advises our council on various matters as it pertains to business and business development for our community, to help quantify if in fact our businesses are at a distinct disadvantage as it pertains to gaming in the village. I would simply ask that they respond quickly to let us know if they can come up with a meaningful way to analyze that. I think it's definitely, and what that timeline might look like. I think that, combined with my desire to understand the sentiment of our community, the feedback that we've received in a more meaningful way, is what drives my decision to make a motion tonight to table the ordinance motion.
Second.
So before we go any further, I'm going to respectfully ask if you will withdraw the motion and make it later, simply because we haven't heard from everybody on the council and we haven't heard from a whole lot of people out in the audience yet, and the motion to table is non-debatable.
I withdraw that motion.
Thank you. So with that, I'll ask if there are any other comments from the council before I go to public comment. Commissioner Cullivan.
Yeah, just to direct some comments that were directed, or respond to some comments that were directed to me. First of all, the $10 million figure was incredibly easy to figure out. I simply took 500,000, divided it by 0.05, and it came up with $10 million. Everyone here who has phones and calculators can come up with the same calculation. I do have the Galena figures in front of me, and for the last full fiscal year before video gaming was introduced, their food and beverage revenue was $223,258. In the first full fiscal year that they had video gaming, it was $226,006. That's an increase of $2,748 divided by 223. 258 equals 12.3%. Some people may think that's a great increase. I don't particularly do. As far as signs, I didn't go on a quest to drive all over the place to find video gaming signs. I happened to be in a resort community, was surprised to see they had there, so I took some signs. I didn't take signs the entire building. I was specifically trying to capture the images of the signs. And then, however, Liz Schauberg, who is a concerned citizen, and she wrote in as a concerned citizen, not other capacity, did send in pictures that she took over the weekend in Westmont, showing what the signs actually look like. The issue that I have with the video gaming industry is they have not seen any other signs that don't look like this. I do appreciate my colleagues' attempts to mitigate the circumstances and put certain controls over it, but when all is said and done, I frankly don't aspire to be like Westmont. And I'm not ashamed of that. And, you know, you could call me prideful or a snob, but, you know, anyone who knows me and what I do for a living and what I've done in my life will tell me I'm very far from that. Should I be proud of Downers Grove? Yes. Should I aspire for Downers Grove to be better? Yes. That's my job. That's what you elected me to do. You did not elect me to become just like Westmont or Woodridge or Darien. Those communities have the opportunity to build a wonderful downtown. They carved Woodridge out of farm field. They carved Darien out of the farm field, and the founders didn't have the foresight to build a downtown like ours. Westmont went a different direction. They went along one block with, you know, very little coming off their main street, which is Cass Avenue. That's not my problem. So because of their scenario, Westmont is forced to get whatever revenue they can from whatever source they can. They have standalone bars. I was an Uber driver for 4 years, 2 years full-time, and I drove people to those establishments. So that's the kind of snob I am. A guy that would come home at 4:30 in the morning to earn $20 an hour. And I took people to those places. And they were all jovial on the way there and all excited. And they had this, you know, wonderful, effervescent, outgoing personality. And when I picked those people home, they're all very sullen and introspective. In a lot of cases, there was no discussion, particularly if it was a husband and wife. And if it was a group of middle-aged men, specifically divorced men, I was embarrassed by the way they would talk. And I would not want to be associated with those people. And frankly, I don't want those people in Downers Grove. Sorry, but people who demean women and you know, go from bar to bar specifically to pick up women and have that kind of attitude, that's one of the reasons we don't have standalone bars in Downers Grove. A lot of people don't understand that. Our idea is that if you're going out for entertainment, you're going to have a meal. You're not going to be able to go to a bar or a dive bar specifically to get drunk with your only purpose. So is it a different kind of atmosphere? I'm proud of our atmosphere. I think we should sustain it. And like I said, it's not my job to protect Westmont or be just like Westmont.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Walz.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to try not to repeat a lot of what was already said. As I'm sure people at home in the audience can see, there's a lot of different perspectives and opinions up here. I'm hoping as we move forward, my colleagues and I can continue to respectfully engage with one another, because these issues tend to get heated even for us up here. So I'd like everyone to keep that in mind. As previously mentioned, I am not necessarily for gaming in our community, whether that be the downtown or otherwise. However, my opinion has fluctuated back and forth as these meetings have gone on. I had originally said I may be able to compromise and approve video gaming if it was zoned out of our downtown. As Commissioner Gilmartin mentioned, we found out our Downtown Management Corporation's board meeting that includes 2 restaurateurs on it had unanimously voiced their opinion to keep it out of the downtown. We continue to hear resident feedback, and again, as Commissioner Gilmartin mentioned, really only up until a few hours ago were we receiving emails that were for video gaming. Up until that point, a lot of it was both for keeping video gaming out of the village entirely, and then a lot to keep video gaming out of the downtown. Those emails that I received, I tried to clarify for people that simply said keep it out of the downtown, that there were really 2 options on the table. So I'm not quite sure you know, what was communicated or how people perceived what we were discussing up here, but I wanted to make sure that that was clarified for the residents. So you know, given all of that feedback and continuing to receive these emails, I am okay with some type of pause to see if we can get any additional information that would help us to better make a decision to find a balance between what our business owners want and what our residents want. And I think that's important. I don't think we can ignore either's opinion. everything up here is trying to strike a balance. And so in the spirit of that, and in the spirit of in the past couple hours, those emails coming in that are for video gaming, I am interested in maybe pausing and getting a little bit more information, potentially from our EDC or some other body that staff might think is capable of giving us that information. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'm going to see if Bob's got anything, and then I'll come back to you, Danny. Mayor Barnett, would you like to add anything at this time?
Yeah, I've got just a few thoughts. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
I'm clear.
Reflecting on both the conversation tonight and last week, which I also watched, as well as a lot of the dialogue that we've had from residents and businesses over the last month or so. A few things that are kind of jump out at me. The first thing is this comparing to other communities. Comparing is one choice of words, benchmarking is another. We do not operate in a vacuum. We look to others for good ideas. We look to others when we think there are opportunities to learn from them. We obviously participate in collective organizations such as DMMC, and then we have partner organizations that also do the same. Our EDC doesn't operate in a vacuum. They work with other professionals in the field. And as I look around the DuPage County map of red and green and look at those communities which I would prefer to benchmark against and to set as targets, they tend to be those without gaming. But again, I think we're dealing mostly in anecdotal evidence. When we hear things like dollars per machine based on a state average, that doesn't tell us anything. Of course, every business in town, whether it's the Holiday Inn that we heard about or the gas stations that have already asked, every business in town would love to have a zero overhead cash generator in the back room. That's not data. When I hear green and we hear 27% since 2013, that's barely keeping up with inflation. If that's a benchmark, it doesn't strike me as a benchmark we should target. The ordinance has to be assumed, whatever ordinance we put in place has to be assumed to be utilized to its max by the next applicant. The reason I point that out is because we hear a lot about folks saying, well, I won't do this, or I don't have much interest in that. But whatever ordinance we put in place, if we put one in, has to be assumed to be utilized by the next applicant. That means the next restaurant that opens, the next person who comes and starts a business. And so that's just something to keep in mind. When we look at a town or a photograph of one place versus another, and we say some pictures look good someplace and some not bad another, we have to think that whatever we put in place will be utilized by the applicants to the max. And it is a subjective thing. It just frankly is. We have spent, through ordinance and codes, we have compelled and are still compelling millions of dollars in signage and design, architectural design improvements throughout the village. Through our downtown and Ogden Avenue TIF districts, we've spent millions and millions of public dollars on improvements all designed to spur aesthetic improvements and incentivize private improvements. From public signs to landscaping to streetscaping, we've worked hard in aesthetics, and they are subjective. That is absolutely what they are. But we've started down a direction that my opinion is anything I've seen here in our neighboring communities or elsewhere around sort of the tri-state area that would run down the road of gaming tends to work, in my opinion, in the opposite direction of all that work that we've done. We limit a good many things, not just legal vices. We limit legal business activities that have nothing to do with vice. We regulate them and in some cases flat out prohibit them. We regulate their space, where they can operate, to what extent they can operate, and in some cases we just flat out prohibit them. That's really what we do, and it's designed to have a reflection of what we think our community's goals are, and what we think our community's priorities are, and what their values are. And those change over time, to be sure. I reflect back on a time when I was first involved in the Liquor Commission, and I won't get the wording right, but I think you couldn't even have the word beer, alcohol, or tavern in the name of your business. Clearly some things change over time, but it is what the council, this council, and all the ones before and all the ones to come will do. We regulate in ways we think are consistent with the goals, aspirations, and values of the community. and they change. They're not to say that they're right or static, but that is what we do. So when we talk about being reluctant to do so, that's kind of not one of our choices. We are going to do that. Whether it's this particular instance or the next one, we are going to continue to regulate in ways that inflict or impinge on people's rights and abilities to use their property or engage in whatever activities they think they want to, many of which are legal in the state of Illinois. And then the last thing I guess I want to point out is just remind everybody that helping business takes a lot of forms. In Downers Grove, we help businesses in a variety of ways. We have a very low tax base. Whether that translates from property owner to tenant, I don't know. But our property taxes are often lower than our neighboring communities, including places like Woodridge and Westmont. We used our TIF opportunities to improve and help our local businesses. We've utilized our agencies like the EDC during the pandemic to help our local businesses. We make physical investments in our community all the time. And we don't have business licenses. I don't know what the average business license cost is elsewhere, but we have tried real hard to keep the cost of doing business to a minimum in Downers Grove. And that might be part of the draw. It might be that we are looking for people who recognize the low cost of business and feel like that's an advantage to their business. So I remain opposed to this. If we want to go forward, I think we should go forward with meaningful data that's not anecdotal. So if a table motion and some effort at trying to accumulate additional real data is the way we want to go, I certainly could live with that. I still remain at this point opposed to gaming. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Glover, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was wondering if it's possible to bring up the fee structure in the ordinance, because I don't see it on the fee structure for the terminal fees. I mean, I guess if you...
I think it's on page 2 of the green sheet.
What's that?
We'll pull it up. It's not actually in the ordinance. It's
Right.
Yeah.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, there it is.
I guess it's for times like this, we should probably have a little music or something.
I mean, I feel like that's Commissioner Wallace's job.
You could play us a tune.
Page 10.
page 3.
I think it's in that.
It's right here.
It's page 10.
Is it page 10?
Yeah.
I was looking in the blue box on 2.
I was looking at table 3.
That's it. Yep. Is that what you're looking for,
Okay, yeah,
Commissioner?
so in order for the village to make 500,000, it looks like the fees are gonna be about, what, 108 or 90,000 plus, I thought there's 18,000 initially, plus annually 90,000. I thought I did the math and it was like something like 140,000. Right? Or on the bottom it says 250,000. So if you deduct that number from the 500,000 and then take your calculator and multiply it by the 5% that you were stating, that's where you come up with the 5,000 or the 5 million gambled.
Okay, I'll stipulate to that, Commissioner, that the people in the surrounding areas are only going to lose $5 million that they're not spending elsewhere in the community. So I'll yield to you on that one.
Okay. Commissioner Stowski, for you.
Yeah, I have one more thing I forgot to mention. I'm sorry. I just wanted to remind everyone, because this has been something that I've kind of noticed in a couple emails, that we have been discussing this issue for months. This isn't something that's been kind of quickly brought up. This was actually identified as a priority action item in our long-range plan. So we have had months to address concerns of, data or lack thereof. So again, just a reminder that this isn't something that's come up in these last couple of weeks. It is something that we identified this summer. So just kind of another reminder that this isn't new.
Thank you. I'm actually going to pick up at that point because it has a lot to do with my thoughts on the matter and how I've shifted over the course of the last 24 to 48 hours. So when we started this, I was in favor of gaming not only in most of the village, but all of the village. When you look downtown, you'd think a place like Tivoli Bowl, another round, Emmett's and some others would make a lot of sense. I also am troubled by the idea that if we zone the downtown out, given some changes that may come in state law very quickly, the Moose would lose out on an opportunity that if we don't zone them out, if we did simply nothing, they would be able to take advantage of. And given the relative lack of public input over the period of the last couple of months, I was under the impression that there wasn't a whole lot of input out there to be had. That changed over the course of, I guess, the last 96 hours or so. And more, the emails and calls and texts and whatnot started to come in. And it started slowly and then it picked up. And up until a couple of hours ago, it was, in my head, about 99-1 against, which surprised me. And this is a decision that I think there's a lot of data out there on. We can figure out very, very easily, I think, some rough estimates on what revenue we can expect the village might receive and what revenue we can expect a restaurateur might be able to receive as well. We may be able to get additional information from the EDC about whether or not our restaurant industry here in Downers Grove is at a competitive disadvantage, as they tell us they are. I hope there's a way to do that. I don't think the EDC staff is necessarily, it's a pretty lean staff. It's something that there might be an industry expert out there that we could find and work with the EDC to find them. I'd like to have that discussion with them. But it's also, at its core, I think, a value-based decision. I think we've got some differing opinions on what and on how to make that decision, and I think you've heard some of them tonight. But I think the feedback, largely up until a couple of hours ago, was that the residents who were reaching out more and more valued not having gaming more than having gaming, and they were very vocal about it. And including a number of friends of mine who reached out to me with, and I'll clean up some of the language, but it was essentially, what are you thinking? And that gave me some pause. I think seeing some of the additional feedback come in over the period of the last couple of hours has turned some of the numbers, and I think it's important that we continue to get that feedback. So while we look for additional data, if it's possible to get it from the EDC, or from another outside consultant. I am interested in continuing to get the feedback from the folks in the room here tonight and the community at large, because I think attitudes are stronger than I initially anticipated, to be honest. And perhaps that's shame on me after having sat up here for 8 years. But that's kind of where my head's at the moment. I'm not necessarily saying no. I'm kind of saying not at this moment. I want to do more listening. I want to see if there's more data out there that we can get. And now that we've all, yes, Commissioner Colvin.
Finish your thought.
No, please. I was going to open up public comment.
Okay, yeah, so I guess I'll make the last one before public comment because I'm interested in what you have to say. The feedback was overwhelming, and Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem was not exaggerating. It was literally 99-1. And then this afternoon we got a flurry of emails that sort of said the same thing, but were in support of it. I'm a big supporter of our restaurants. I want to see them survive. I want us to have the best possible competitive advantage. Some of the decisions that we make up here are data-driven. Some of them are not data-driven. They're sort of values and how do you feel about something. We don't have a lot of data that we've made this decision on so far related to what would those impacts be and what would the societal impacts be. So I think it's worthwhile to take a look at those things.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now that we've all had at least our first say, the floor is open for members of the public. Please come down to the podium. We'd love to hear from you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Francis. I'm curious, among the lot of you, with all of your concerned citizens giving all the feedback, what's the number? How many people? 99 to 1 or 9 to 1? How many? What's the number, please? Can you tell me any kind of ballpark?
I'd have to count it up, honestly.
Okay.
There were, the remarks, you can scroll through very easily on the website.
Would you guess 100?
I would guess at this point it's probably more than that.
500. Would you say 500 people emailed you and said they don't want gaming?
No.
All right, well, let's say that. Let's just say that 500 people emailed you. You know what that is? That's 1% of the Downers Grove population. 1% is 500. I'm going on a rough number because Downers Grove population, as per 2019, was 49,470. So 500, roughly 1%. What you got there is 1% of people that don't have anything else to do than to call you or to email you or to write you. 1%. You want to make a big ruling on 1% of people's opinions? I don't know where it goes with that. Maybe I'm wrong being a math teacher for over 34 years, but I'm not betting nothing on 1%. That's me. Maybe I'm wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't mind a line if you would like to form a line.
Just keep 6 feet apart.
Good point.
Good evening. My name is Alberto Torres, and I first want to say that as a resident of Downers Grove, and I am not a business owner, but I am in favor of video gaming throughout all parts of Downers Grove, with certain universal restrictions in place. Now, changing hats, as the president of the Downers Grove Moose Lodge, I would like to dispel 3 myths being propagated about video gambling. The first is the thought that video gaming is opposed by all residents and is only being advocated by businesses. At the Moose, we have anywhere from 800 to 1,000 members at any time. Of those, opinions vary widely. Most of the people I talk to are in favor of citywide gaming, or they're in favor of all businesses being treated the same regardless of where they're located. Certainly, there are also members that are opposed to video gaming. To claim that residents are all against gaming is absolutely false. Secondly, I'll just touch on this briefly. The myth purported last week that if video gaming was voted down, then $10 million would have been spent on gaming would otherwise be used towards causes enriching the community. That's just obviously wrong. It's not like people are waiting in the wings, ready to enjoy video gaming, and if it doesn't pass, they're not going to spend their money elsewhere. They're going to do it somewhere else. They're going to do video gaming somewhere else. Finally, as to the arguments made that video gaming would assault family values, a picture was painted last week of a family walking into a restaurant and being assailed by the sights of sounds of people using video gaming machines and the potential negative impact on the children. Is this picture based on facts, or is it just appealing to emotions? Honestly, I think it's appealing to emotions. But I think the answer really depends on how video gaming is implemented. Just today, I toured establishments up and down Westmont. I didn't just go outside and take a look at the windows. I went inside of them. And in some instances, I completely disagreed with the implementation. In others, It was done exceptionally well. Are you going to find yourself in a situation where you or your kids are sitting next to a bunch of obnoxious, loud gamers? Well, have I found myself in a position where my family and I were seated next to loud, obnoxious patrons at a bar or restaurant? Absolutely. And guess what I did? I walked out. I voted with my feet. But more importantly than that, Downers Grove is in a position to implement this correctly in all locations. Part of the restrictions are the 7-foot walls, volume turned way down, space and revenue limited to marginal amounts. These are good things. Are restaurants in fact going to have gaming right next to diners as was depicted last week? If they're smart, no. Why? Because people would vote with their feet, as I just mentioned, and wouldn't patronize these places. If the restaurants chose, would they have it in discrete locations? Absolutely. Why? Because it can work. Just look at some places in Westmont, like J. Fleming's. I went in there today. They have video gaming. They're a restaurant, have tons of seating, and the video gaming is located all the way in the back behind walls. You can't see it. You can't hear it. I again encourage you to join me to visit various moose lodges with gaming that have done it correctly. I'll grant you that some haven't, but I assure you that if the moose were allowed to have video gaming, I will do all of my power to make sure that it's done the right way. And in terms of some of the lodges that have done it correctly, Lockport, Carpentersville, many others. Excuse me. I will caution one thing though. Please don't rush this vote. Take as much time as needed to consider the implications of the various restrictions and rules that you're considering. Most notably is the lack of any guidance as to the entrance to the gaming room. It's here where you're going to ultimately see the difference between implementations. Those offering discrete versus non-discrete, and those establishments that will be acceptable throughout Downers Grove, and those that should not be in any part of Downers Grove. Please consider this carefully. Take your time, be equitable. Don't punish those of us who are on the wrong side of a line. We can get this done the right way, a way where we can all partake, or not, and still maintain the social fabric of this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wayne Ford. I'm a member of Downers Grove, Loyal Order, Moose 1535. I want to caution you about choosing who gets gaming based on what side of the tracks they are on. Majority of the businesses in the downtown district are small businesses. They are not the businesses such as those that are up on Butterfield, Hooters, or the corporate businesses that are down south on 75th Street. So the gaming revenue that would be appreciated by the businesses could be better directed to the smaller businesses associated in Downers Grove, down in the downtown district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Larry McComb, J&J Gaming. So far, you guys have done a great job on what gaming should be if it comes to Downers Grove. I ask you to look back at other cities possibly that already have it, like Niles, Illinois. Not that far from here. Back 8 years ago, they didn't have gaming. They were never going to have it. They passed an ordinance allowing 20 locations to have it. However, they will not allow any exterior signage. That's the ordinance they passed. Today, they have 38 gaming places there. 38 restaurants and bars that have gaming, and there's not one exterior sign. I talked to them yesterday. I said, how is it you have no signs? We passed an ordinance, and everybody's happy with it. So there are the guidelines you can follow to restrict signage and make it universal throughout the city that you don't know you have gaming unless you walk into the place and you know it's in a hidden area. That's the kind of things that are happening out there. It can happen here too. So consider some of that kind of things in your decisions, and maybe you research it more. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Samantha Schroeder. I just wanted to say about the comments that were said before. Firstly, I would never compare spending $50 gaming to going miniature golfing or playing bingo, because gaming can be addictive, and no one has used those words so far, but gambling is an addiction. So I think that that should be put out there. Okay. Gaming is very clearly something the majority of the Downers Grove residents do not want in our village. The council should be voting based on their constituents' interests, not based on the desires of some local business owners. There are plenty of Downers Grove restaurants that have made it through the pandemic because they are catering their menus and environments to today's demographic. Today's demographic is more of a foodie crowd than a gaming crowd. This demographic is turned off by gaming. They don't want to see it where they are dining and socializing. As a local realtor, many of my buyer clients choose Downers Grove because they love our downtown. Many of these buyers are looking to buy in other similar suburbs with a similar feel to Downers, like Glen Ellen, Elmhurst, Wheaton, and Naperville, all of which have thrived without gaming. And many of them end up in Downers Grove because of our friendly community. It would be a shame if they end up choosing other suburbs after they see gaming establishments open on Ogden Avenue instead of the wonderful new businesses that we have, such as Mod Pizza, City Barbecue, and Smoothie King, which is what today's demographic wants to see. Gambling exploits a vulnerable demographic. The fear is not of the gamblers themselves. I don't think I'm alone in my opinion that exploiting people while they are drinking alcohol is not ethical. And it's just not something we want in Downers Grove. If we're going to allow gaming in Downers Grove, what will be next? What image are we trying to cultivate here in this village?
Thank you. Any other public comment? Good evening.
Good evening, folks. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Brian Bentley. I have 35 years of working experience in the casino gaming industry. I've seen just about every report that talks about compulsive gaming and so forth, and how it's perceived throughout the communities and how it affects people. Currently, my wife and I, we own a great little restaurant in Downers called Brian's American Grill. I would like first to thank the current Downers Grove Council and councils past for their leadership. As a resident of Downers Grove, it is comforting to know that we have a pragmatic group of passionate individuals that take time to learn the facts about issues they're called to address. In some cases, using a wait-and-see position before taking action in order to assess outcomes of similar acts in other communities. However, there is a point when good-intentioned pragmatism unnecessarily stifles progress and the future. Video gaming was approved by the state nearly 10 years ago. Since then, 1,045 communities have approved VLTs. Crime did not rise. There was no increase in transients. Property values didn't plummet. Children were not irreparably damaged by seeing a slot machine in a restaurant. None of the apocalyptic predictions came to fruition. It is time to stop citing personal opinion as fact. Personal perception is reality. Personal beliefs is data. And stroking fears as reasons for not moving forward with approving video gaming. Council knows the facts. There are enough of them out there. We presented many of them. We can see the results if we choose to look at other communities that have been around for 10 years with video gaming. 10 years. There's no guesswork left. The council need not delay this vote from input from the Economic Development Corporation. I can tell you, we are at a disadvantage. We do have to compete with other communities that have video gaming for labor and pay, and we just can't do it. It's tough. It really is. To delay this vote is from my opinion, it's a purely political maneuver, just to basically table it, and eventually it'll go away. That's how I feel. That's how I'm looking at it from a political perspective. Based on the abundance of fact 10 years of results observed of people in surrounding communities having gaming, and the hard economic data available from the IGB website, it's time for the council to vote and approve gaming. There have been numerous anecdotal and misleading misconceptions that have been offered up here as fact in this debate. I'd like to just address two of them. They've been touched on tonight, but I have to revisit them. First, it was stated that Downers Grove residents would need to lose $6 million for the city to realize its share in gaming taxes. And in doing so, this person appeared to imply that if we don't approve gaming in Downers Grove, these folks will somehow not gamble. I can say with certainty that these people are already gaming today as we speak. These same Downers Grove residents are taking their money and spending it in Westmont, Woodridge, Lamont, Lombard, Oak Brook Terrace, and other nearby communities, including soon to have Warrenville, which just voted in last month. Not allowing VLTs in Downers Grove is not going to stop not one person who wants to play slots from playing slots. Not approving video gaming in the village is akin to actively supporting businesses and helping fill the tax coffers of surrounding communities while simultaneously hurting Downers Grove businesses and giving away much-needed revenue. The second misleading anecdotal story was offered up with no context or facts about a fight that was observed at Fremont Tavern. You see, Fremont offers video gaming. The implication that the fight was somehow caused by the video machines being there. Now, in full disclosure, I was not there. I have no first-hand knowledge of what happened. However, as a restaurant owner that serves alcohol and having 35 years of experience in gaming, I'm pretty sure this fight had nothing to do with slot machines and everything to do with the consumption of alcohol, which, by the way, is also very addictive and can create problems. In the October 19th council meeting, Mike Gilbert, a respected former village council member, stood before you and made several very astute statements. He reminded us that not too long ago, downtown Downers Grove was dry, no alcohol sales. The same anecdotal, emotional, factually incorrect arguments that were made then to stop the council from legalizing alcohol sales at that time are the same arguments being made about not approving video gaming today.
Brian, can we hang on a second?
Yes.
Okay. Can we get him back?
Sure.
Guess we ran out of minutes on our conference call.
I think the mayor needs to pay his cell phone bill.
Like another quarter.
Right. Maybe you just need to charge it.
Sorry, I got my finger where I'm at.
Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome, Mayor.
Please continue.
So those arguments included, it will destroy our wholesome image, attract transients, crime will increase, property values will drop, and children will have easy access to alcohol. That very wise council separated the facts from the fiction, debated them, and then bravely approved alcohol sales downtown. They knew it was unpopular amongst the naysayers, but they also knew it was the right decision. Well, all these years later, we should thank them for their independence and courage. Our downtown as we know it would be non-existent, as would be the revenue downtown restaurants contribute to the village. Can you imagine your real estate tax bill would look like today without these restaurants? Your schools, roads, playgrounds, infrastructure without the tax revenue generated by these businesses? It is a fact. Alcohol can contribute to drawing transients, increasing crime, deleteriously affecting property values, negatively impacting the image of a community. These things never happened in Downers Grove. Why? Because we had strong leadership that put effective laws and rules in place for selling alcohol in the entire village. This council possesses the same qualities and courage and wisdom of the leadership that brought us alcohol sales to downtown so many years ago. this council just needs to apply it to video gaming. I mentioned several real outcomes that are part and parcel associated with the sale of alcohol. Many people have tried to apply these same outcomes to video gaming. However, the real facts regarding video gaming do not comport to their perceptions, opinions, and beliefs. We can prove empirically with data, facts, and actual historical results that video gaming does not destroy the wholesome image of communities. It does not attract transients, unless, of course, that is what you call your family, friends, and neighbors these days. Crime does not increase, property values do not drop, and children are not overly influenced, or for that matter, care about the sight of gaming terminals. They are usually fully consumed with using perhaps an equally harmful piece of technology with flashing lights and appalling sounds, their parent-provided cell phones. Well now, we know there's a threshold for tolerance for allowing sin-related activities in Downers Grove, such as vape or head shops, as they were better known back in the day, marijuana dispensaries, and selling alcohol. Compared to these currently condoned and legal activities in Downers Grove, video gaming hardly even registers on the sin tolerance scale. I'm urging this council to summon the courage it possesses and to use the wisdom and independence it has. Divest yourselves from the heated anecdotal rhetoric. Ignore the emotional pleadings. Listen to, but not give greater weight to the loudest in the room, including those in private council chambers. Heed the facts and make the informed decision. Even as some here offer up their passionate, vociferous opposition, as others did during the debate to approve alcohol sales downtown, this sovereign and brave council will be remembered with the same favor as past leadership that approved alcohol sales downtown so many years ago. The passing of time and history will demonstrate your decision to approve gaming was the correct one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Any other public comment?
Hi, Bob Taft here. Just a couple quick things I wanted to touch on. It seems like this conversation often kind of gets off track, and the issues that we're having are, like, for example, with signage in the windows. You guys understand that you can outlaw that, so that should not be a point of discussion. You can minimize the signage in the windows, as every single city has ordinances as far as signs go. Another one is the sound of it. You can also have them so they have to be muted. So that shouldn't be a point of contention that we don't want to hear the sound, we don't want to ruin the ambiance of a restaurant, because you can have it quiet. Also, as discussed, the other thing was the visual impact. Again, you can have it in a room, quiet, segregated in the back. A lot of places have it in different locations because of their clientele. No business that has a clientele that would not appreciate it is going to put it anywhere where it would be seen anyways. And if you want to prohibit that, make sure you have it be enclosed, silent, private room. Another thing that we keep hearing is that even the downtown business owners don't want it. Let's remember, this is not like a mandatory thing. If you vote to allow it in, it doesn't mean they have to have it. It gives them the freedom to choose to have it if they think it would benefit their business or not. It is not a mandatory thing. So if you allowed it in downtown, which I'm not in downtown, I'm saying if you did, doesn't mean everyone's going to have it. I know the one comment was made that multiple business owners said they don't want it. They don't have to have it. It's not an obligation. Another thing, I don't appreciate, there were some comments made about business owners with anecdotal evidence about how it is in the real world. Well, as Commissioner Glover had stated, the real world, I'll give you my real world. I have 5 locations, two do not have gaming. One of them is Downers Grove. Our pay is less for all of our employees. We do compete constantly with surrounding locations or surrounding towns that can offer lower price specials, burger specials, things like that, because they do have enhanced revenue. We can't do it. And it makes it very difficult. It is an unfair advantage. That's not anecdotal. That's my actual numbers and life experience. And pretty much everyone I associate with is in the service industry, and I hear the same things from everyone. And those aren't anecdotal comments. Those are actual facts. And then someone made a comment about it was against his morals to have people like this in that town. But yet, where do we set the line? So is marijuana okay, vapes okay, cigars okay, alcohol is okay, but this is too much? I although it is definitely your responsibility to, keep Downers Grove in the right community, I don't know how all vices, certain ones are allowed and certain ones are not. Didn't seem very logical. And then I'm in agreement with Brian. I really do think that the vote should be held instead of tabling it and just kind of get it over. There's been 10 years of this. I've had it at one location for 10 years. In 10 years, we've never had a single incident regarding video gaming. That was never a cause of any incidents. Surrounding communities that chose to opt in contacted Darien, is the one I'm talking about, as they were in prior, and they said, and Darien Police Chief also reiterated, they've never had an issue regarding video gaming at any location anywhere. So I don't think that there's any more data to be gathered over the course of time. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. Marty McAlpin, resident and associated with Prairie State Gaming, terminal operator. Commissioner Culvaney, you mentioned the numbers on the food and beverage prior to the opt-in and after the opt-in. What you didn't mention, though, were the numbers after that first year, going from 226 to 259 to 269 the following year, 285, and then a drop from 280 back to 285 again in 2019. So we can clearly see that the food and beverage tax increased over time in the village of Galena after they opted in, and they've shown no signs of going back from that. The EDC, we welcome their input. They're for economic development. Video gaming clearly incentivizes economic development in the village. They are not concerned with the moral debate argument that we're having amongst ourselves. Their primary concern should be economic development and protecting the downtown and the idyllic culture of Downers Grove and the wholesome culture of Downers Grove. And that's why I think most of the proponents here are all for gaming to happen, regardless of if it happens in the downtown or out of the downtown if it's excluded. So we welcome the agency that's tasked with talking about economic development, bringing to table all of the benefits of video gaming, whether it's the commercial real estate prices and new commerce and business opening up around business locations in Downers. So we're welcoming that discussion and debate. I would just say that I think that we have seen clear support in the last meeting and this meeting, and the remarks from the council agenda, the e-remarks, all clearly, with the exception of one, clearly indicate support. So I think I asked for a lot of the proponents out here, where is this opposition? We've seen it a little bit in the last meeting, but we haven't seen it at all tonight or in the e-remarks. So we welcome continuing to work with all stakeholders in this process, because Downers Grove is special, and we know that we can make gaming work here in Downers Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. I'll bring it back to the council. Any other comments from any of my colleagues? Commissioner Culvaney.
Just a couple. It occurs to me that under our current ordinance, we don't allow video gaming. If that's still the case in July 1st, then the Moose, the VFW, and the American Legion, if Public Law 3136 is signed by the governor, which I suppose it will because he helped usher that through the General Assembly and pass that, then those establishments would be able to. The only way that would not happen is if we limited gaming downtown. Then, as a home rule community, we can set more strict regulations. So there's really two ways for the Moose, the VFW, and the American Legion to get it. Either we outlaw it totally in Downers Grove, or we accept it everywhere in Downers Grove. There have been other comments about regulating signage. We do not have the authority to regulate signage anymore for video gaming establishments than we do any others, and that's a key part of our sign ordinance. One of the reasons our sign ordinance passed muster all the way through the federal appeals court. The petition was made to the Supreme Court, and they turned it down, meaning that our sign ordinance, the Downers Grove sign ordinance, was found constitutional. So that's the deal with that. Regarding Downtown Management Corporation, they did vote unanimously. Seems like we really herald those who agree with us and then discount them when they don't agree with us. And regarding the number of emails until this afternoon, the number was, I sort of lost count at 99 or 100. Sometimes you have to stop and actually get ready for the meeting. But that's all available through FOIA. Regarding the comment that it's only a small percentage, we have trouble getting 6 people to come here on any given Tuesday night, even though we're here the first 3 Tuesdays. You know, if we get a handful of emails on most subjects. This one we got over 100 this week and about 20 in e-remarks last week. So if you ask a village council member, anyone sitting out here, is that a big number? I think everyone agreed that it is a big number. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is it's not only the good intentions of the business owners currently, but it's also the intentions of the business owners that buy them at some point in the future that have made no affinity or backing in Downers Grove. And I don't think anyone in this dais mentioned crime as an issue, and hopefully we wouldn't set that as the bar for deciding for or against something. Also, we're constantly called to make judgment calls up here. We're called to look at data. We're called to use our own life experiences. You know, if we didn't use our own life experiences to make decisions, whose life experiences would you expect us? And, you know, we're allowed to be very passionate if you agree with us, but we're not allowed to be passionate if you disagree with us. So, in my case, I am not ready to have this move forward, and I agree with my commissioners that are asking for more time and more data. I think that makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mayor Barnett, would you like to add anything?
No, thanks for checking, Greg.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to table the motion establishing video game regulations.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion to table is non-debatable. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Nay.
Commissioner Colavani?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Nay.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye.
That motion passes 5-2. The matter is tabled. That concludes our active agenda. We have no first reading agenda, but we will have the manager's report, which I think, I'm sorry, Manager Fieldman.
I'd like to call an audible here, and we will like to present the manager's report at an upcoming meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Well, there goes the rest of our agenda. Madam Attorney, do you have any report?
No report, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item 13, council member reports. This is an opportunity to present items of interest from the community or any reports from organizations that you might be liaison to. I will start to my right with Commissioner Colavani.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The Downers Grove Historical Society is hosting History on Tap. I'm sorry to inform you that those tickets have been sold out, so you'll have to wait till next November to take advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you. Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit.
No report, Mayor Pro Tem.
Commissioner Wallace.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Glover.
No report, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Commissioner Glover.
That's
Commissioner Gilmartin.
I take that as a compliment, Commissioner. No report.
Thank you. Mayor Barnett.
No report.
I also have no report. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.